Well, hello, folks out there in YouTube land. Got a big show lined up for you. Let's get right on into it. All right, folks, it's the day after the big decision by the judge, and the media, of course, they're in their meltdown. And if you know anything about how the NCAA does, they usually leak stuff out. That's how they like to do business.
Now fly! Fly!
But this story's been a little different. They actually came out and gave a response to the lawsuit from Tennessee and Virginia against them and said, oh, that's what the schools wanted. They asked us to enforce all these rules for NIL. It's not us. So that kind of got them off to a bad foot. They're used to just leaking the stuff out like they do to the Pat Fordays, the Dennis Dodds, guys like that. And then they run with it with their narrative. And they don't have to go out and give any type of an announcement or any type of comment. But see, the problem is this. They messed with the wrong cat. That's just a fact. They shouldn't have messed with the Tennessee Vols. They'd already hung around for 2 years and caused us all kinds of problems, which, look, we took our medicine with the whole Jeremy Pruitt thing and took our penalties and moved on, which is what you're supposed to do. And we cooperated fully with them. But that didn't satisfy them. They decided to come back after saying how we were so exemplary with our cooperation and said, oh, no, this is a major violation, what happened with Nico and that plane ride, and we better get them. And what it boiled down to is there were no rules for about 2 years.
Right now, there are no rules around how name, image, and likeness works. And for your audience, that's the opportunity for student athletes to benefit from their name, image, and likeness.
And even the president of the NCAA said that. But they decided to retroactively create rules that supposedly were there after they got their teeth kicked in by the Supreme Court in the spring of 2021. They basically kind of put their hands down and didn't know what to do for 2 years. And then their new president came in and said, oh, well, we're just going to have to really ramp it up. And they went after FSU, nailed them over a car ride for a guy going to an NIL meeting. They lost 5 scholarships, gave the coach a show cause for 2 years. I mean, it's a little bit ridiculous. They're going after Florida, we know that, and of course Tennessee. But the problem is they didn't realize what they were messing with.
Well, I didn't think you had it in you.
I'm your huckleberry.
Why, Johnny Ringo, you look like somebody just walked over your grave.
Exactly. Yeah, Tennessee showed them who the huckleberry is. And the judge came out and pretty much ripped him in his conclusion and told them they were breaking the Sherman Act, the antitrust laws, and they were keeping kids from being able to know their full value and keeping them from being able to negotiate their best terms, which is against that law. So he went ahead and gave the preliminary injunction, and I've showed you that in the last video. If you haven't seen that, check that one out. But from this point forward, the NCAA can't do much of anything when it comes to NIL. Their hands are tied, which is they should be. And they need to kind of get with the program. They can't continue to break the law just because they write it down on a piece of paper. And I've told you this, I can write anything I want on this piece of paper, and so can they. Doesn't make it the law. It just doesn't. They've got to stop breaking the law.
Stop breaking the law, asshole!
And if they'll do that, I think they'll start being able to get along with teams and schools. But let's get into the media. As you can imagine, Pat Forday, Dennis Dodd, and several others are not happy. And actually, there's a great article out by Zach Reagan, and I'm going to show it to you, that really kind of spells this out, and he does a terrific job. And it's titled, "The Tennessee Vols Handed the National Media Another Huge L, and UT fans should be smiling about it." Definitely. And Zach brings up the fact that in 2017, the whole Greg Schiano fiasco, and that's really what got Pat Forday and a bunch of these other guys really going against the Vols. They pretty much have gone after him for years now. They wanted Greg Schiano hired, and the Vols fans did not. So they're not supposed to have a say, even though they buy all the tickets. They give the University of Tennessee all the money they need. They should have no say. It should be up to the athletic director, and the Vols fans should just shut up, according to Pat Forday and the rest of them. Well, that's not how the world works. It just doesn't. This is not 1952. People have a say. So he's pretty much ripped the Vols over that for years and years. He's never forgotten it. Then there's another fella, Barrett Saleh, who he had a few opinions about it. He said it's going to take Tennessee 5 years to get back to a bowl game. It did this to itself. Better start on a sequel to Decade of Dysfunction. We went to a bowl game that year. Went 7-6. The next year we went 11-2. So, Barrett, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but you were wrong. Really wrong.
I I was not exactly right.
You couldn't have been more wrong. Then it talks about how fired up the national media was about the NCAA investigation into the Vols. And Pat Forday, he calls him the de facto leader of the national media's assault against the Vols. Basically, he's the head leaker. He gets the leaks, and then he does the NCAA's bidding. That's how he rolls. And he was salivating over this. I mean, he was talking death penalty. He was doing all that. Here was one of the articles he was involved in. He was actually on a podcast, and it was and it was titled, "Could the Death Penalty Be Involved for Tennessee versus NCAA?" Oh, did he want the death penalty so badly. That would make his career. Then another national media type says, if the NCAA goes away or fractures, it's not going to be over whether a school got punished for breaking rules. It's going to be because two different groups of schools are forced to operate under different rules. It says, like the chancellor of Tennessee or any school can write a scathing letter that plays well on social media, but there was never a version of NIL rules that allowed for collectives doing the recruiting. So I'd love to know what Tennessee thought was vague or confusing. I'll tell you what was vague and confusing. It goes against the law. That's the problem.
Hello?
Also, the state of Tennessee and the state of California, Missouri, Florida, all these states pass laws that are actually legal and binding that says they can talk about NIL and they can pay players. But these old school national media guys, they think the NCAA is all powerful. They're the great and powerful Oz. And they can do any, look, they're the man behind the curtain.
Oh, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
They can't do anything if the courts smack them down constantly because they keep breaking the law. It's what they do. They can't help it. And let's see what Dennis Dodd had to say. He's not happy. He said, I wrote this after Austin, but yesterday's preliminary injunction in Tennessee versus NCAA reinforced my take that a generation of judges, no matter who may have appointed them, have grown up with an NCAA brand being damaged that has, in capital letters, to make a difference, even though some of these courts are obviously home cooked. Oh, now he's blaming home cooking in Greenville, Tennessee, I guess is what he's saying. The federal judge didn't give him the original injunction, if you'll remember, but he did the second one. So if he was home cooking, he would have done it right off the bat. They're breaking the law. Dennis Dodd also wrote, I've written NCAA is dead story for 15 years. Yesterday was big and probably inevitable, but schools still can't do direct NIL deals. NCAA still can seek a stay for appeal purposes. A trial or settlement still remains possibilities. Maybe I'm becoming jaded. Yes, you are. You need to learn how to take an L. That's the reality. I don't want to hear what the NCAA, they can't do squat on NIL. A federal judge just smacked them down, put an injunction on them. If they start messing around and going against what a federal judge says, that's probably not going to go over so well. I tell you, man, these writers, they don't know how to take an L. They just don't. It upsets them. Now, the guy that had the biggest meltdown was definitely Pat Forday, and you've got to understand how writers are, people that are journalists and things like that. Their whole thing is writing.
Okay.
Their whole thing is expressing their feeling, their writing, and doing all that sort of thing. When they just write a little sentence, that's when you know they're having a meltdown. Check this out by Pat Forday. Tennessee gets a win versus the NCAA. End of story. Dead stop. That's an epic meltdown. And Zach Reagan says, Forday, one of the original bro media members that loved to dunk on Tennessee, which always fails at doing, tweeted the news on Friday like he was a social media manager tweeting the final score of a blowout loss. Oh, yeah, that was my favorite tweet. The Dennis Dodd one, at least he kind of, decided to keep fighting on. Pat Forday, he just can't handle it. It's too much for him. Okay, Tennessee wins. Story at 11. See ya. What a joke. Oh, man. Take your L. And oh, by the way, let's remember one thing. The NCAA started this, not us. This is what they wanted.
Remember, you wanted this.
That's right. And they got it in the end. Now let's see some Tennessee fans on Twitter having some fun with this. Tony Basilio said somebody needs to give Pat Forday a hug. Tough day for him and the rest of the national media ideologues still buying what the NCAA is selling. It was fun for the haters while it lasted. Get ready for Nico Unleashed. Tony summed that up beautifully. And here it says Pat Forday talking to the NCAA, waiting on them. Here's another one that says Pat Forday, after all the NCAA propaganda, amounts to nothing and falls flat on their face. Here's another one. Pat Forday, after seeing the Tennessee win versus NCAA. Classic. I'd say that's exactly what happened. And here's the deal. You can only push somebody around so much before they push back. And that's what happened. Tennessee just pushed back. They were done taking crap from the NCAA.
What, are you gonna cry now? Come on, cry, baby, cry for me.
And I had gone out of my skull.
Yep, and that's how you deal with a bully. You can't negotiate with them. You can't reason with them. You just got to pop them. It's the way it is, and that's what we just did to the NCAA. We just gave them a right hook, a left hook, and then an uppercut. And if you like this content, be sure to hit that like button. Let's continue to cover my Vols, the SEC, and all these big news stories. If you've not subscribed, right here, hit this little button right here. Cost you nothing. Come on.
Come on. Come on. Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
And right over here is the most recent video YouTube thinks you'll enjoy based on, it's probably the one where I had a little party on the NCAA's behalf. Anyway, we'll see you next time on Sports Talk Jay.